time for some stories to start your morning. Earlier this week, Greg Popovich caused a stir when he said he's not expecting to have Kawhi Leonard back this season. Yesterday, Kawhi's teammate, Manu Ginobili, spoke about the saga and said the Spurs are too close to the playoffs to keep waiting. Chris, does Kawhi owe it to the Spurs to play?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously he's being paid a lot of money, but look at Isaiah Thomas. And that's how Kawhi and other players look at this thing. Like, this is a guy that went out and played hurt. Now, I know there's question, is Kawhi really hurt? In his mind, he believes he's hurt. This is a guy that's been one of the toughest guys in the league the last several years. So I don't know what the issue is with him. I know the Spurs will tell you that throughout his history, way before this injury, he just wanted to be 100% before he got out on the floor. Little nagging injuries, whatever it might be, he wants to be fine, perfect when he's going out there. And he's looking at an Isaiah Thomas situation. Oh, played through the hip injury, played when his sister was, tragically killed in a car accident. It was inspirational during the playoffs, and what'd you do? You traded him. Now he's lost tens of millions of dollars. So I'm going to side with Kawhi on this one. I know it might not be the popular opinion.
This drives me nuts. Every player at some point in their career has to play at 70, 80%. If you're not all in, not only has the Spurs medical staff cleared him, but also second opinion has said he's fine. And I'm sure this is driving Pop nuts. But you want to be careful if you're Kawhi, who has been a tough player. You want to get labeled as soft. And more importantly, you don't want to lose the respect of your teammates who are in there every day. And I wonder if they're sitting there saying, oh, there he is again, like he can't play because he's not 100%. You do not want to get that. And if you're the Spurs, are you going to give up $217 million to a guy who only plays when he's 100%? That concerns me.
That's the big question.
Last night, the Sixers squeaked out a one-point win over the Bulls. Ben Simmons scored a career-high 32 points along with 11 assists. Joel Embiid added 30 points and 13 boards as Philly won its sixth straight game. Chris, how close are the 76ers to being contenders in the East?
Well, they're not going to contend this year. If they just make the playoffs, that'll be great because that'll speed up the process. They don't make the playoffs, it'll be like, well, let's just make the playoffs next year. They make the playoffs this year. Next year, they'll be looking at trying to contend for the conference championship, especially if LeBron James goes west. Joel Embiid, they are a different team, obviously, when he's on the floor. They play at a 50-51 win pace when Embiid is healthy. So if he's healthy for the playoffs and you meet them as a 7th seed or a 6th seed for Washington, Toronto, Boston, Cleveland, that's a first-round matchup you'd hate to see. I don't think they'd upset one of those teams, but they could make it a lot tougher than they want.
That Joel Embiid question is a big if. Like, if he stays healthy, a guy who's been plagued throughout his career, they've had to manage his minutes, and he likes to go out and play, but every time you're kind of cringing saying, I hope he makes, I hope he survives. But ultimately, I think they're not a contender this year, but the experience for them to get to the playoffs, to give their fan base some enthusiasm, to start to see some of this young potential actually go out and start to show it and see results on the court, I think it's huge for the organization.
Last night, Oklahoma City needed every second to knock off the Kings. Russell Westbrook hit a game-winning three at the buzzer. He needed just 3 quarters to pick up his 18th triple-double of the season. Melo, Paul George also chipped in with a combined 49 points. Danny, are the Thunder a threat in the West?
I wish they were a legit threat because I love watching Russell Westbrook play. Like, he puts his body on the line. He plays with his fury and his passion that I wish every single player in the NBA played with. But physically, I don't think it's possible, except for a freak like him when you talk about his athleticism. But ultimately, I don't. I think it's the Rockets and the Warriors. Those are the 2 contenders from the West. And it's still the Warriors in that kind of head above everybody else.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, but Oklahoma City has been great against the top teams. They're 6-3 against the top 3 seeds in each conference. They're 2-0 against Golden State, 2-1 against Houston. And Golden State, if they meet OKC in the second round, that's going to be a very emotionally taxing series. Physically, too, because Westbrook, as you said, he just puts so much pressure on you with his athleticism. But with Durant and Westbrook, Durant and Oklahoma City, that would be, again, you hate to see those taxing early round series if you're in the playoffs, but that's what it would be for them.
I would love to.
We would. The Warriors would.
Type of series. Out of the NFL, Des Bryant's future is best described as murky. Yesterday, Cowboys CEO Stephen Jones said that they are, quote, trying to understand what's in our best interest. Dallas would save $8.5 million against the cap if they were to release Dez. Danny, what should the Cowboys do with him?
They're doing exactly what I think they should do. They should try to get him to play at a reduced rate, to take a pay cut. And that's why they're being very delicate with their wording. They're saying, hey, we're doing our best interest. And they're not putting a lot of pressure on him because I'm sure behind closed doors, talking to Dez, talking to Dez's people, his agent, they're saying, we would love him to be a part of our organization. He's been a big producer for us. But as that production has dropped in recent history, we can't afford to keep you. And if we want to be a winning franchise, we need to save some money to spend it elsewhere. But Dez is struggling with that, which every player in the NFL throughout history has struggled with that point in your career where you think you're worth more than the team is willing to pay for you. And a lot of times it ends out not so well because the player plays hardball and says, you know what, then cut me. And then they find out the hard way, oh, there really isn't that much money. So that's what's going on with Dez Bryant right now.
Yeah, as controversial as he's been for them in the past, I didn't think he was very good last year. All the drop passes, he lost the step, wasn't getting the separation. He had a ton of targets and caught about half of them. He may even been a little bit, he was about half of his targets, and everybody else was far higher than that. All that said, I'd still like to have Dez Bryant on the Cowboys if I'm Dallas, but like you said, at a much lower price. I think Stephen Jones, I love the way he's handling this. He hasn't been overly critical, but he is not treating Dez with the kid gloves that his dad has and like they kind of have in the past. And so maybe this will humble Dez, the criticism, the lack of performance from last year. Maybe he comes back with a strong offseason and is better next year. I'd love to see it for the Cowboys, but you know, he's not worth $12.5 million at this point.
I'm sure Dez Bryant is looking saying, man, our quarterback regressed. Ezekiel Elliott was out for 6 games with a suspension. Like, hey, why am I getting the focus of this attention? And it's all because salaries. It's the way timing is a lot in life. And he's at a point where his contract is prohibitive as far as the team goes. And so I wonder how Dez handles that, because I'm telling you, most times players do not respond well to pay cuts, as anybody does.
And don't you think, too, the emotions, the negative emotions that he's brought, you know, the antics on the sidelines and stuff, when you're that type of player, when you're productive, oh, we'll put up with it. We don't like it, but we'll put up with it. But when your production begins to dip, that's when it hits the fan, and that's kind of what's going on with Dez, too.
You mentioned Dak taking a step back last season. How important is it for him to have?
Huge. This year is it's funny because talking about Isaiah Thomas, like how much money he lost, because Dak, if he could have restructured a deal after his rookie year, he would have broke the bank. But the Cowboys said, no, you don't have to. You're under a few years. So now he had this season where I felt like he got exposed a little bit. But he has to come back this season and prove that he's the quarterback of the future for the Cowboys. And he's going to have to play better than he did last season, because when you do have Ezekiel Elliott back, when you do have an offensive line that's as good as he has, you should put up better numbers and put out better production and get your team to the playoffs. And if he does that, he'll get paid. If not, then it gets really tricky for the Cowboys moving forward.
Does he need Dez there to help him do that?
I think he does. I think Dez is I think he's a good wide receiver if they can get the pay cut. It really is. I mean, that's why the Jones family is looking at this saying, man, we'd love to have him take a pay cut. And you just hope that Dez buys into that.
All right, moving on. Kirk Cousins has been the talk of the town ever since the season ended. He'll have no shortage of suitors on the free agent market. Right now, the Jets are the betting favorite to land him. However, they reportedly aren't going to hand Cousins a blank paycheck. Danny, where should Cousins play next season?
I think it's pretty easy when you evaluate the circumstances around there. And first of all, I think the Vikings are going to go with Case Keenum at a reduced rate. I think Arizona is probably going to sign a draft a quarterback and maybe try to get somebody they don't have to back up the truck for. For me, it's easy. You want to go somewhere you can win, and you don't have to rely so much on the talent around you. And I look at the Denver Broncos with a franchise which has a rich tradition of winning, stability. You've got a Hall of Fame quarterback who runs the front office you can kind of lean on. Peyton Manning goes there, you know, has his kind of resurgence with his career, gets another Super Bowl there. Their defense is still a force to be reckoned with. You've got pieces of the puzzle in place. I think it's a no-brainer to go to Denver.
I'm with you. I think Denver would be my top choice. Jacksonville, depending on what happens with Blake Bortles, they would be right there with Denver, maybe equal if I'm Kirk Cousins, if they get involved in it. Cleveland, we had Eric Mangini on.
Yeah.
We have to say he coached in Cleveland. He lives in Cleveland, so maybe that's why he said he should go to the Browns. I totally disagree. I don't think he should go to Cleveland. I'm going to bring up the Jets, though. And they wouldn't be as high on my list as Denver and Jacksonville, but there's talk out there, reports out there as well, that they could back up the truck for him. And, you know, I mean, they've kind of said, look, I mean, they were talking about fully guaranteed contracts.
Unprecedented.
And they've said, no, we're not doing all that. But if the money is significantly different, if I would take a little less to go to a Denver or Jacksonville, but if it's like wildly different, the Jets have a lot to offer. You know, they've got the cap space. Even if they front load his deal and give him a huge payday up front, they still have the cap space to go out and improve the team. And then they'll have more next year where they can improve the team as well. I think Todd Bowles did a good coaching job this year. So let's see what he could do with a real quarterback. Again, they wouldn't be my first choice, but if the money is that much different, then I wouldn't be afraid to go to the Jets if I'm him.
And if the money, you're going to make even kind of, there's a bonus of playing in New York, because if you play in the biggest media market in the world, where you're going to have so much attention focused on you, win or lose, you're going to have opportunities that you wouldn't have in Jacksonville. Like, you're going to make a ton of money, but you also, if you can win there, again, you're set for life if you can win in New York, in a franchise which has been desperate to find a quarterback. But the thing about Cleveland, if he goes there, and this is what I don't know about Kirk Cousins, because I do know he plays with a chip on his shoulder, and I do know it bothered him that Washington continually disrespected him and would not give him long-term security. So does he value enough of saying, you know what, I am a franchise guy. I am a top 10 quarterback in the league. I can go to Cleveland and turn this franchise around. I don't know if he has that type of swagger behind him. Maybe he does, because he plays like it.
Yeah.
If he goes to Cleveland, I think wherever he goes, he's going to lift the level of play. And that's been a knock for him. But I thought he proved everyone wrong when Washington got rid of Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon. His numbers did not drop off at all, throwing to Terrell Pryor, Josh Dotson, who was hurt a lot of the year. Like, he didn't have many weapons and still put up monster numbers. I don't think he's a product of the system. I think he is a top 10 tier, like a top-tier quarterback in the NFL.
See, I just don't feel like because that's what Mangini was saying. If he goes to Cleveland, he's going to, and just gets them to the playoffs, makes them a viable team again, he'll get all this praise. He would, but I think he'd get as much praise if he led a Denver or a Jacksonville to the Super Bowl or close to the Super Bowl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or even the Jets team, you could. In New York, everything is magnified. If he got them to be a consistent playoff team, he would be praised wildly. I mean, more so than in Cleveland, because, again, everything in New York is magnified. Now, if he loses in New York, he's going to get crushed.
Right.
And does he want to deal with that and the tabloids being in your business?
I think he's been used to being crushed in Washington. And more so crushed by his own coach and his own front office, which I think is really messed up. Because I think the perception of Kirk Cousins would be totally different if only he was drafted where RG3 was. And if they had traded away picks and made that move to get him as the number 3 overall pick, I think he would have been extended a long time ago. But because he was a 4th rounder, because he wasn't Daniel Snyder's guy, it was more Mike Shanahan's draft pick, I think that has hurt him. And it's the perception of him as not this 1st round pick. I think it's killed him. And that drives me insane, because I think he's proven himself for 3 straight years that he's a top 10 quarterback.
Okay.
I'm in on Kirk Cousins.
Coming up, how much pressure is on Lonzo Ball tonight? That is next on First Things First.